a member of the Malcolm X movement, and thanks for coming out on a cold, dark evening on this wonderful island on which we reside. It looks like hardly any of us are actually originally from here. What the hell are we doing in this country? I think you know. And part of that story is what's happening in Palestine as well. It's a story actually of colonialism and resistance to that. And of course, Palestine has been colonized actually by the British originally. We have the Balfour Declaration of 1917, who was a senior member of the British state at the time, who decided that Britain, also Winston Churchill, supported the idea, the whole British establishment wanted an extension of itself in this region, because this region for millennia has been fundamental to global trade routes, as we've seen with our Yemeni friends impacting that trade route right now in solidarity with Gaza, and also because of the Holy Land, and especially Jerusalem being a destination of pilgrimage for three major world religions. It's an important economic hub in that as well. So the British colonialists, as you probably know, have been actually extending themselves, intruding upon that land since the 11th century, which was the first crusade by the English state, which was also the same time that the English state instituted its first racist law against Jewish people. And as Frantz Fanon said, when he was discussing with his teacher one of his books, that if they're talking about the Jews and their racism, listen carefully, because they're also talking about us. Now, there's a complexity around what happened in Europe. So Britain basically starts the colonizing process in Palestine. By the mid-30s, by 1935, 1936, Britain is openly arming Zionist settler gangs to confront the first uprising of the Palestinian people, led by Al-Qassam Izz-ad-Din, of 1936 to 1939. The Palestinians made the British mandate, basically the colony, ungovernable, and it was a brutal counterinsurgency by the British. And of course, all colonized people, of which nearly all of us are here, are well aware of our heritage in terms of the brutality and the colonial genocide they've impacted the Indian subcontinent, throughout Africa, the Caribbean, and so on and so forth. So that brings us to, and I'm skipping obviously a whole bunch of stuff which needs to be studied and understood, but the Palestinians are still struggling against colonialism. And actually they're world leaders in that. And they have been ever since they formulated their struggle in the 60s, which first kind of came out of the general restlessness and burgeoning pan-Arab struggles against French and British colonialism primarily. Big up the Algerians and the FLN, and also other people, very significant struggle in Algeria, which springed off the victories against French colonialism by the Vietnamese after Dien Bien Phu in 1954. And that directly inspired other anti-colonial movements against the French. But anyway, we come to this point in time, and why is the Palestinian struggle, the struggle of the Palestinian people so significant? Because it's relentless, because it's uncompromising, because it cannot be defeated, and in that it inspires other oppressed people who are also oppressed by the global system of colonialism and white supremacy racism. It shows to us that you can stand up like us, you can unite like us, and you can be confident in fighting back this oppression like us. So of course that's a threat. It's the threat of our good example, which for the colonialists is the terrible example that must be demonized, criminalized, and genocided. I think if you study Palestinian modern history, and the history of North Africa and the Middle East in general, and the colonial peoples in general, Caribbean, Africa, Asia, so-called Latin America, you will find that the colonialists will punish that at any act of resistance, how dare the oppressed rise up? How dare they not take their oppression lying down and have the peace of the graveyard? We don't want the peace of the graveyard. We want peace based on justice and liberation for the Palestinians. So this is, I think you kind of gleaned some of the politics of the Malcolm X movement through my introduction, but also what we do in alliances in grassroots communities like this. This is a poor working class community. Actually, these events that we've been doing, the third of which, and thank you to the SET project for facilitating the space. I hope you don't mind me saying thank you to you, Josh. You're a great brother and comrade, and it's a great partnership with you. If you could have a round of applause, actually, for SET. This, like many working class high streets, is slowly becoming more depressed, neglected, and sad, and negative. We don't want that. We want the counter opposite. We want to resist that, to build a creative, beautiful, joyous unity at the grassroots that we and the elders and the youngers and the children deserve the very best. They deserve the absolute best, and it's the same for the Palestinian children. And it's devastating what's happening to them across historic Palestine, but particularly in in Gaza, but also in West Bank, but particularly in Gaza. You know the figures, you know the numbers. And it's very interesting what's going on. And this leads me into introducing the first speaker this evening, and we have 4 speakers in total. We're going to go through the speakers and then we're going to share some food. Actually, before I ask the speakers, I want to ask you something. So we're trying to organize for the Palestinians, and it's interesting right now because you know from yesterday, December the 16th, there is no national march planned until January the 15th, and we consider that unacceptable. The Christmas period is the period most important to the capitalist system, and their vulnerability is our opportunity to conduct solidarity for the Palestinians. So we don't accept that there's no national mobilization in this period. We don't accept the banning of Palestine protests outside the Israeli embassy in High Street, Kensington, which happened now 6-7 weeks ago. That was conceded without a protest by the protest organizers. We don't accept that. We don't accept that young people come onto the marches with no guidance around policing and the law, and then they're grabbed by the police again and again and again. This is not acceptable. We have to actually be with our young people, defend them, and guide them through the law. And in that, just to be clear, the law is becoming more draconian, and the state is becoming more fascistic, and we can see that and feel that since October the 7th. So in regards to that, I have my political differences with them, but it's illegal to support or to glorify Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So we would discourage you to do that because we don't want you to get arrested and charged. Okay? And it's also, and we don't agree with anti-Jewish racism because Israel uses that to manipulate for its own interests. We don't accept that Israel is a Jewish state. It's a Zionist, white supremacist, colonial settler state. And there's many Jewish comrades in solidarity with us directly. But again, if you, and we would say wrongly, see it as a Jewish problem, that is also against the law, so we don't want you to get arrested and charged around that as well. And also the politics are problematic as well. So before I ask my first speaker, actually, the way we organize our events, instead of having this panel of speakers who have this kind of hierarchy in so doing, I'm going to throw it out straight to you, like what are your concerns around perhaps what I've shared or something else around the solidarity movement with Palestine? Just some reflections. It could be criticisms, it could be good things, it could be things that you want to raise to the room. So I'm going to throw it out first. So it's a spirit of non-hierarchy and that we're all on the same level. So yes, please, if I don't mind. And if anyone does not, should we keep the camera facing forward or are you okay to be? Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to keep the camera facing forward so nobody's face whose attendees is going to be filmed, because lots of people don't want their faces to be filmed. And actually we encourage all young people, all people, not to use your real name on social media, and not to disclose your identity on protest as well. Keep yourself anonymous is our guidance around policing and the law and criminalization and racism. Please, thank you for volunteering.
So, I wanted to raise the issue of boycotting, because I've been to many protests, not enough. Of course, I want to carry on the protesting, and I'm glad that you raised the issue about Christmas, because I was just listening to one of the press people in Palestine, and they were like, why are you celebrating Christmas when Jesus, peace be upon him, was Palestinian? So I agree with that, and the capitalist part that you raised, so that was great. But I feel like when I go to these protests, I see people wearing Nike, Adidas, and holding coffees at Costa, and I feel like I have to go up to them and say, look, you know, if you're not educated, let me educate you, because I wasn't educated before. So it's just like sharing knowledge and like debranding, decapitalizing the country so we can spread equity and equality, which I'm like firmly, that's one of my principles as well. But until we don't boycott the brands like with discipline, I think that'll be a major issue in bringing down the capitalist society that we live in. And that's the reason why so many people are depressed, because you save money as well when you boycott, but also you're not investing in like that £1 or £2 in coffee that goes towards the arms. Okay, so that's all I wanted to share with you guys.
Great, that's great. Thank you. Absolutely. Anyone else want to come in? Feel free. You will have a chance subsequently. Yes, please. Thank you.
Just a point of law, actually. When you're on protest, it's important that you have your ID with you. So I think keeping yourself anonymous is not safe. And if you are arrested, it's really important that you can show who you are. Otherwise, you're going to be held back longer than you should be. I think the important thing is to actually give out details about solicitors and so on, if there could be an active way of handing out cards to people on demonstrations, and if there's law centres or solicitors who are willing to help people just in case they're helped. But it's critical that people have ID on them.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come in? You will have plenty of chance later, but anything else? Feel free. Not at the moment? Okay, so before I ask my first, our first speaker, just one of the main challenges we have right now, and it's amazing to see this outpouring of humanity from our grassroots. Part of that is our young people in schools. The school institution, the education system has been very manipulative in hiding behind so-called neutrality to actually facilitate the colonial politics and the racist politics of the genocide. In every single secondary school and college, and in many primary schools, but in every single secondary school where there's young people who have the feeling of solidarity with the Palestinians and the people in Gaza, they are being repressed in the schools as we speak, and they have been for over 2 months. And that's not acceptable. And this really pains us to see that they're not being given, again, adequate support and guidance around that. Teenagers are doing it by themselves, and it's really inspiring. And so the first speaker is a little bit older. I don't think you're in high school anymore. But also, so the next speaker is of Libyan heritage. Like her generation, her name is Comrade Az for this event. Super bright, really informed about the politics of colonialism and resistance. And it's no coincidence that we are really kind of prioritizing these kind of voices, because the young people need to be in front, and especially the young people from colonized backgrounds. And Libya has been devastated by neocolonialism since 2011, since the NATO war of destruction and division. So please, a warm welcome from Comrade Az, who's going to share some.
Is this okay? Yeah. So SK has obviously introduced me as a young person, so I think I'll speak specifically from that perspective. And I think what I've noticed recently a lot is that a lot of young people from my generation have been, fortunately, a lot more informed on the issue of Palestine recently. And obviously we've seen the turnout for the protests has gone up, especially with the younger generations. It's more mainstream to be pro-Palestinian, especially on like social media and whatnot. But unfortunately, I do feel like it stops there with a lot of people. That, you know, we'll talk about Palestine as this, Israel as a settler colonial state, and then that's it, like, no more. And I think that's why it's so important that when having these conversations and when more and more people are being introduced into slightly more radical spaces than they are used to and becoming more political, it is so important to remind people that this is not an issue, well, obviously not something that started on October the 7th, but also not something that is not interlinked and inherently intertwined with everything else that's going on in the world, not just in the global south and the Middle East, but even here in the UK, understanding Palestine as essentially just another arm of Western imperialism, and making sure that people understand this and are educated on this, and not just seeing Palestine as this, I suppose, singular entity that exists in this vacuum, because Palestine will never be free if we don't dismantle the whole system that keeps it in place. And I think obviously SK also brought up the fact that I'm Libyan, and I think Libya is quite a similar example of this, where we Libyans, obviously, there was a revolution, people, you know, regardless of what you think about the revolution or whatever, Libyans tried to take the state back in their own hands. We freed ourselves from colonialism, and then we had Gaddafi, and then we had another revolution, blah, blah, blah. And I go to Libya almost every year, and I have not seen any improvement, unfortunately. You know, the capital city is still riddled with violence and militia rule, whatever. And I think that it is because we as Libyans don't have that education of seeing ourselves as a victim of neocolonialism and understanding that Libya will never be free, we as Libyans will never be liberated, so long as Western imperialism keeps us under its foot. So that's why I think, like I said, I think it's so important to make sure that these things are brought to light. I think also understanding how that same Western imperialism and that capitalism affects us here in the UK, and how that's been affecting young people who want to speak up about Palestine. SK also talked about the fact that laws here are becoming more draconian. We are leaning more and more towards fascism, essentially. And I think earlier I saw the tweet from the Met Police where they will constantly take photos of people at protests and then tweet them and be like, oh, we need your help to find this person who has held up this sign. And this sort of almost like a witch hunt, you know, facilitating hate crimes against people of colour in the UK, essentially, and making sure that the public always is reminded where the police stands, where the state stands, where the government stands on these issues, and essentially using the public as volunteers for their hate crimes. So, yeah. Yeah, that's essentially it.
Excellent, Asma. Really, really good stuff. Listen, it's very important to be conscious and strategic and prioritize voices like Asma and also the next speaker that we've got, because it has to be colonized young people who lead the struggle. It has to be. It can't be middle-aged middle-class, white domineering men who have no experience of this whatsoever. And they try to control and hold these things for dear life. So people like Asma and Femi don't actually lead the struggle. Femi and Asma know much better than racists in Stop the War or PSC or whatever. They know much more about how colonialism works. They're from families who've been through it. They're going through it themselves. As colonized people in the kind of internal colony, quote unquote, within this state and this island, and also in the homeland. So we make no apologies to say, fire it up, take the leadership, and we will support you unconditionally in so doing. And in that, as I introduce our next speaker, it's very important as well to fight the colonial divide and rule. And the central way they've tried to do that, actually in North Africa and the Middle East as well, especially in the Caribbean as well, and especially here in Britain and in France, is to divide two colonized communities. Who are they? The Asian community and the African community. Walter Rodney made it very clear, revolutionary from Guyana, very influential across the Caribbean and Africa, student, teacher at Dar es Salaam University in Tanzania. He said, was very clear in his definition of black power, Asian and African people must be united. That this is the central strategic approach in the Caribbean for a successful struggle. And this is the same here in Britain. If African and African Caribbean heritage youth are united with North African, Asian and Middle Eastern youth, we've got a really good, powerful struggle that we can actually get a lot of things in return. So in that, I'd like to give you a warm welcome from West African Heritage, via Bolton, in Oxford, was part of Oxford, he was an Oxford University student in the Roads Must Fall campaign, a close brother and comrade of ours. Please welcome Femi Nylander.
Plastic, probably not. To the children of Gaza, to the martyrs, who never got to participate in their intifada, to those under the rubble, befuddled and framed, blamed for the crime of bearing Palestinian names. Rain falls of phosphorus, forbidden atrocities, odyssey of struggle embodied in buried bodies, the mass graves and hypocrisy. What is the point of policies and institutions when the mask falls off of the underlying fascism that embodies the wealth which the West steals off of the corpses of children? All of the oil of the Middle East, strategically placed pirates feeding America's greed. May the voices of their victims haunt them in their sleep. May the deceased they devalued wake them from their dreams. May they be weary, such that they have no rest. See, to live in falsehood and hatred, may they sow what they reap. Those who never have the joy of understanding, who live behind lies and deceitfulness for fear of dismantling a worldview steeped in falsehood and destruction, a narrow devotion to theft and corruption, a Starbucks sip and a Westgate trip, but no fellowship, only shallow seduction. So, I just want to read out a statement by Susan Abulhawa, a best-selling Palestinian author, on, well, you'll see what it's on. Zionists are pushing a new line of propaganda aimed at breaking black solidarity with Palestinians. The narrative goes something like this. The only reason Palestinians are getting attention is because they're not black, which is not true, because many Palestinians are black. Just look at the millions killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Look at Sudan. Look at Tigray. So, I want to point out that in fact, Israel is at the heart of the genocide in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Israel has been arming and training militias in Rwanda and Uganda to maintain the violent chaos that facilitates Western mineral extraction from Congo's mines. The M23 militia is the primary culprit for the devastation in the DRC. They've received surveillance software, military hardware, funds and training from various Western states, and especially Israel. Furthermore, Israel not only cheered for the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected president of the Congo, but they helped prevent bringing his murderers to justice. Israel helped maintain the horrifically oppressive rule of Mobutu Sese Seko for decades. A contingent of Israeli armed and trained paratroopers were the backbone of Mobutu suppression throughout Congo. Dig deeper into any atrocity across Africa and you will find Israel. From the Rwandan genocide, Israeli arms dealers boasted about supplying weapons to Hutus, to the genocidal diamond extraction industry, or any other extractives in Africa. It's fine if you folks don't want to speak up for Palestinians. It's a whole other level to go on social media to explain why others shouldn't either, at the hour when the equivalent of 2 atomic bombs, I think it's closer to 3 now, because this statement, well, maybe even beyond 3 now, this statement was from a few weeks ago, have been dropped on the most densely populated place on earth. Sadly, people think solidarity is a zero-sum game. We can chew gum and walk at the same time. What's also interesting is that a lot of folks bringing up the DRC themselves have never said a word about it before now. And of course, this isn't only Africa, where we talk about Israel kind of working as a vassal state for militarism in the world. I mean, if you look at things like Colombia, in the past, Israel has had very close links to dodgy Latin American presidents, Fox, etc., helping to train militias, helping to train death squads, all this kind of stuff. Given that, we know, of course, Israel has very strong links to the United States. It's not surprising that they don't retain this kind of excessive militarism that they've developed, this culture of imperialism to the local area. Although the primary reason, obviously, is to help manage the local area. We know how many military bases the US has all over the world. It's very easy if you can have one big military base that pretends it doesn't have nuclear weapons and place it in the region. Nonetheless, this idea of unity between colonized people is very, 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 very important because, firstly, there is unity between the West, this very concept of the West, Israel being in the Eurovision Song Contest. Another thing you should boycott, by the way, thanks. It's like, okay, but you're not in Europe. You're telling me that you're indigenous to the Middle East, so well, why are you in Eurovision? The West, New Zealand. The West, Australia. The West, United States. These places are not all in one. I'm looking at a map, I'm looking west. What? Maybe it's a different word that begins with W, right? And so, what we have to realize here is that in our oppression, they are unified. And so in our liberation, we must be unified. And we must not allow ourselves to be pitted against one against each other. That is not to deny that within certain communities, there is anti-black racism. That's not even to deny that within the black community itself, some Nigerians are not saying, oh, these Caribbeans, I don't like this. What are you doing with dreadlocks, Femi? What are you doing? You think you are one of these Jamaicans? Or there's some Caribbeans are not saying, no, I'm not African, I'm not African. There's, even within racial groups, we have divide and rule tactics and trickery, which is put into play. But between as well, myself, I love learning languages. I love learning different about different communities. I love going out and meeting people of different heritages. Partly because it's just nice to meet different people and find out about other cultures, but also because I know that if within Africa I'm there as a Nigerian joking with a Ghanaian person about my jollof rice being better, but I don't know a single person from Togo or a single person from Benin, and those two countries are both between Nigeria and Ghana. We're not actually neighbors, and the reason for that is because they were colonized by the French and I was colonized by the English. That's a problem. So I know that because of that, I need to go out and try and bond with these people. And in the same way, you look at the history of Pan-Africanism, you look at the history of Pan-Arabism, you look at the history of North Africa, you look at all of these histories, it's all intertwined. We were all colonized by the same people. We're all going through the same struggles. And so this unity is very important. And so it's very important for us to stand up now for the Palestinians, and the Palestinians have been standing up for us. I mean, you look at the historic link between the Black Panther Party in the United States, Fred Hampton, etc., and the Palestinian struggle. Big Ben Zephaniah, has just obviously passed from us. He was very dedicated to the Palestinian struggle. He himself went to Palestine on numerous occasions, spent time there. Caribbean heritage. So, yeah, the key message, of course, is at this period, in general, we need to keep standing up. We need to not let people say, oh, you can only focus on one thing. Why are you not focusing on that? Why are you only focusing on that? Of course, there are other issues. Of course, there's issues going on now in Sudan. Of course, there's issues going on now in the Congo. Of course, there's other issues. There's also an issue with Palestine. And you don't distract from Palestine, especially if you're someone who's not spoken about it. Speak about both. Are you restricted to one Facebook status a day? Can you only go to one protest a week? Can you not organize around multiple issues? So, yeah, I think that's the crux of my message. And if anyone has any questions, now or afterwards, please feel free.
You can sit down. So I think I'm going to just field a few questions and comments in light of Az, I can edit that out, don't worry. In light of Comrade Az's and Femi's contribution. So obviously Comrade Az talked to the point about young people mobilizing, criminalization, her heritage, interconnectedness of struggles, which is a similar theme to what Femi picked up in, honing in on the challenge and the strategy and the ethic framework of uniting different colonized people, particularly Arabs and Africans, Asians and Africans, etc. Anyone else want to come in on this, to add to it or to make some commentary? I'm going to come, because you've spoken, I'm just going to kind of grab people who haven't spoken first. Yes, please.
I'd just like to thank the speakers for putting in their insight. I think we've had some very valuable perspectives. Just on what Comrade Az was saying about the truth is that any movement of support for the oppressed requires new initiative, requires new thinking, requires a new understanding of ideas. And I think no one is more capable of that than young people. And it's so integral that young people arouse and organize and mobilize the consciousness of their friends, their family, their communities, and get involved in the action. Because the truth is that, us young people, we have that fire and we want to get involved. And we see injustice happening in not just Palestine, because when we speak of Palestine, we are speaking of an international struggle of many billions of people against colonialism. And this is especially true of youth, for those of us who come from colonized countries, who grow up dealing with the racism and the oppression and the sexism and misogyny, tenfold. And I think it's so crucial that we use our valuable perspectives in organizing. When we look at Palestine, when we look at Israel, what do we see? We see a fascist state, a terrorist state that is being armed, trained, and funded by many imperialist countries, one of which we live inside. We live in that belly of the beast. We live under the British state. I remember I was reading a news article that said that they did a poll, and 51% of black people in this country don't consider themselves British. And that's true because, we're not British. Much like the Palestinians are exiled from their own countries, many of us are economic and political exiles from our own countries. And in that sense, we have that in common with the Palestinian people. We're united on that front. And the British state, which is arming, funding, and enabling a genocide against people who come from similar backgrounds, from similar histories in Palestine, it is not just opinion. This isn't just an opinion that we have, it's an obligation that we have to those people. I'd like to bring to point a quote from a black revolutionary in America called George Jackson.
Go on.
And he said that you can't sit and you can't say that a state is licentious, bloodthirsty, terroristic, genocidal, and violent, and not expect that violence that is being enacted against billions of people to not come home. Chickens always come home to roost. That's the law that history has shown. And so, in my opinion, it's very important that, especially us young people, the state recognizes that young people's voices are very important. And it always comes to young people first. So I say as a message to young people to take the words of George Jackson in mind and to recognize that it was the same British state that murdered Mark Duggan, murdered Chris Carver, murdered countless black and brown youth that has nothing but hate and contempt for the people that it rules. We cannot expect the same people, the same institutions that murdered Mark Duggan, murdered Chris Carver, to come to those protests and be on our side. That's the reality, because those institutions, and amongst them are many people who are brainwashed to believe the ideas that they have, the ideas that are against the communities, that are against the people. So now it becomes the community's responsibility to do for ourselves, to protect ourselves, to defend ourselves, and take action. And of course, we all abide by the law. We do. But we also take responsibility in the fact that just as the Palestinian people do for themselves, mobilize themselves, organize themselves, defend themselves, that we too have that obligation.
Come on. Come on, man. I'm not going to get too more enthusiastic about that. Brilliant stuff, man. Just fire. Just absolutely on point. Anyone else want to come in? Just on the Britishness, reminder of Malcolm X. He said, we're not Americans in the US context, we're victims of Americanism. We're not British, we're victims of Britishness. Right? I've been in primary schools for 6 years. It's just classrooms of war refugees. Iraqi children, Afghan children, Syrian children, Libyan children, Iraqi children, Somali children, all victims of this state destroying their homeland. And then this education system is saying British values is about rule of law and fairness and democracy. You're really going to tell these children that? It's crazy.
Divorce beheaded died from boredom. Divorce beheaded
Oh,
survived
yeah,
the colonial service.
That's the crowd we get. Anyone else want to come in? Anyone else want to come in right now? Okay, so for the next, so now we've got some poetry, which is really beautiful. I'm really delighted to be introducing Abdulkareem Kasid, and I'm also really happy because he's a really good, bad influence on my father. And it's nice to do a little turn the tables on my dad on this, because my dad's always a bit like, oh, is my son too radical? Oh my God. And it's like, well, Mr. Kasid took my dad to Basra 10 years ago in southern Iraq. And of course, Iraq is very close to all of our hearts. It was my generation's Vietnam, as well as the Palestinian struggle. We were devastated in the lead up to the war of occupation and destruction by US and UK in 2003. My own brother was beaten up by the police on that night. Do you remember? Some of you might remember that night. Some of you might have been there in Trafalgar Square on the night they invaded Iraq. And we're still angry. I'm still absolutely beside myself. I will never forgive these states for what they've done to Iraq. But anyway, we're going to have some beautiful poetry. Mr. Kasid, please welcome, and please welcome him to the microphone. So we have the next generation. Thank you, sir. Are you translating? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for attending. I read some short poems translated by my son Ziad, who will recite them in English. I begin with a poem entitled Gaza of the Poor. للمدفعية والبوارج وانتظار الله أنت وأنت أنت الركن مأتم من أتوك مهنئين وعرس من ماتوا وعودتهم ورحلة من تقطعت الدروب بأرضهم أو تبصرين البرق تلمع تحته نذر وأقدام وموكب مهطعين وطرق أبواب وزحمة ذاهبين وآيبين وقارئين وشرع بلدان تباع وتشترى ولعل من يأتي يهوذا حاملا تاج المسيح الشوك متكئا على خشب الصليب لعل غزة أي صمت خلف صرختك الخبيئة أي صوت خلف صمتك غزة الفقراء والبحر المحاصر والسماء.
Gaza of the poor, artillery and warships, you stand awaiting God, a pillar. A wake for well-wishers, a wedding for the departed, the resurrected. A journey for those whose paths were severed in their land. Do you see the lightning? Promises beneath, hurrying feet, knocking doors, crowds ebbing and flowing, diviners, laws of nations, bought and sold. Perhaps the one who comes bearing Christ's crown, lent on the cross's wood, a silent plea. Gaza. What silence hides behind your scream? What voice behind your silence? The poor, the besieged, and the sky.
Haiku. على كرسيين ناجيين يجلس أب وطفلته وسط الأنقاض.
Haiku. On two surviving chairs, a father and his daughter sitting amidst the ruins.
قصف شيلينج. هل يصل الأطفال إلى الجنة وقد أدركهم الليل في طريقهم إلى السماء؟ هل يصل الأطفال إلى الجنة بأجنحة مكسورة وأقدام عارية ووجوه من شمس؟ هل يصل الأطفال إلى الجنة وقد قطعوا آلاف الأميال على خيول أرجاء؟
Shedding. Do the children reach paradise as night overtakes them on their journey to the heavens? Do the children reach paradise with broken wings and bare feet, and waxen faces? Do the children reach paradise after traversing thousands of miles on limping horses?
المشهد, the scene, to those barking in the funeral of Gaza. الصرخات تمر، الأطفال يمرون، أطفال من فحم، المشهد قفر، المشهد أسود، هجرته الكاميرات، لا ظل هناك ولا قمر، المشهد غاب، فلماذا ينبح من هم ليسوا بكلاب؟
The scene. To those barking in the funeral of Gaza. The screams pass through, they pass by, children of cinder. The scene is void. Set scene, black. Abandoned by the cameras, there is no shadow there, no moon. The scene vanished. So why do they bark?
أشلاء تتكلم. Limbs speak. أنت أخي يا من تجمعني أشلاء لتحملني في كيس أسود أو أبيض. لن أسألك أبداً عن وجه ضاع أو كف قطعت، لكن سأقول يا لشقائي ويا لحملك الثقيل.
Limbs speak. You are my brother, the one who carries my limbs. To carry me in the black or white bag. I will never ask you about a lost face or a severed hand, but I will say, oh, what misery and oh, what burden you bear.
Child 2. الطفل الذي ولد في حارة، الطفل الذي ولد في حارة ها هو الآن يركض في قدميه الأرض ممسكة بحجارتها.
Child 2. The child born in an alley. Here he is now, the ground runs at his feet, gripping its stones tightly.
أيتها المدينة أو city، أيتها المدينة المتوجة بالأحجار، أيتها المدينة المتوجة بالأحجار، حتى وإن غدوت ضلالا، أيتها المدينة المتوجة بالأحجار، حتى وإن غدوت أطلالا، فسيونس وحشتك الموتى أطفالا ونساء وكهولا، وسيبكي من فرح في أعراسك من عادوا أحياء.
O city, O city crowned with stones, even if you turn to ruins, your dead will console you. Children, women, the elderly, someone will rejoice at your celebrations, those who returned alive.
بين زمنين. Between two eras. كم بكى الشعراء، كم بكى الشعراء أجدادي القدامى خياما راحلة حتى شوشبت الأرض من دموعهم. وها أنا الشاعر من في العابر أبكي مدنا درست لم يهجرها الأحياء تحت أنقاضها يؤن الموتى ويحبس أنفاسهم الهواء.
Between two eras.
Between two what, sorry?
Eras.
Eras.
How the poets wept, my forefathers of old, over nomadic tents, until the earth sprouted from their tears. And here I am, an exiled poet, passing. Weep for the cities that were not forsaken by the living. Beneath their ruin, their dead groan, the air holds its breath.
The last poem, أنقاض رول. أنقاض أنقاض تحت سماء تحترق الآن، وأحلام تختبئ وراء مدافنها. صيحات لكن لا أفواه هناك. أيد تمتد كأغصان ذبلت. كسر من مرآة غطاها الدم للتو. ضفيرة شعر الشوكة من أية كف سقطت. الخصلة تلك لمن؟ الشال الأسود ذاك لمن؟ ولمن هذا الوجه النازف بين الأنقاض؟ القطة ما زالت ترتجف من الخوف. الطفلة ما زالت ترتجف من الخوف. الأم أما من أحد ليزيح الصخرة عن صرختها. أحجار أحجار وبقايا بشر نائمة لم تستيقظ بعد، وقد تستيقظ يوما وتحدق في القادم. صامتة في متحف آثار يشرع أبوابه لهوى الله يعود، فلا تتذكروا لا تتذكروا أبدا.
Ruins. Ruins. Beneath a sky ablaze, dreams hide behind their tombs. Screams, but there are no screams echo, but no mouths are there. Hands reach out like withered branches, a shard from the mirror, now veiled in blood. A braid of hair, the fork. From whose hands did it fall? That strand for whom? That black shawl for whom? And whose face bleeds amidst the rubble? The cat still trembles in fear. The child still trembles in fear. The mother, is there anyone to move the rock from her scream? Stones, stones. Remnants of a sleeping humanity yet to awaken. Perhaps they will wake one day, gazing silently into what lies ahead, in museum relics that open only to the breath of God, returning, forgetting, never remembering.
Very appropriate, atmosphere-inducing, beautiful words. Very bittersweet, obviously, and it reminds us of the extent of the dehumanization through the colonial violence in Gaza. It's just beyond words. I don't know really how to express, to be honest. I don't really have to, probably like a lot of you, there's no words to what we're seeing. And personally, I think probably like a lot of you, the only solace I have really is in the Palestinians' ability on all levels to resist. The resistance fighter is that man or woman of any age that stands in the school courtyard, which is now a refugee center, and dresses like a clown and does an activity to make the children happy and laugh. For me, that's a resistance fighter. And it's the same resistance fighter that will pick up a weapon and blast those Merkava tanks and blast that occupation army out of the community. For me, resistance is the same thing, and it manifests in different humanizing ways. So all victories to that resistance. Quite fittingly, the next speaker and the final speaker, I've only got to know of him just through this event, and we've only met today. His life must be very fascinating, as Mr. Kasid's life, as my father's life, as the people older in this room who have been in the anti-colonial struggle, who've dedicated their life. And Yousif Naser, who's our next speaker, didn't want me to say he was an artist for the PLO, but an artist for and a painter for the Palestinian cause. I'm fascinated by this man and his life history. So please a warm welcome from our comrade Yousif Naser.
Many notes. I don't know if we can put it together. Yeah, I just want to start that I'm really happy to see lots of young people still defending the right, stand with the Palestinian right to go back to their homeland, to get their own state. But at the same time, I feel actually emotional that I feel a little bit sad for it, because this struggle has been on for a very long time. I mean, my father was talking to me about, when I was a boy, about Palestine and Israel and what's happening there. My uncle went to the war between Israel and the Arabs in 1948, and he got wounded there. And many people from my town, the neighborhood. So he thought, my father, that maybe when I'm young, the whole thing will be finished. It actually didn't finish. What happened, the thing became even more like worse than before. And now I can see like new generation still suffering from the same thing. People, new generation, new ages, still suffering from the same thing. It won't finish. It's not going to finish very soon, unfortunately. And as a close monitoring, as a person who's been watching, monitoring the whole issue closely, I can easily say that Israel is not a state designed for peace. You cannot make peace with Israel because this machine has been made for something else. It's like if you want your bicycle to fly or cook on a computer, for example, it doesn't work. Israel has been made for something else. If they do peace or truce or something here and there, they just do it on the margin, on a secondary stage. The main stage is not that. Israel is a base for imperialism. It's a military base. What they call it in America, I think, it's a stable or stationary aircraft carrier, which is needed there in our region. Why it's needed in our region? To bring us misery. I remember when I was a boy, my brothers to the stadium one day, and we saw a sign in the middle of the stadium said in Arabic, أيها العرب لا ننسى فلسطين. Oh Arabs, do not forget, we shouldn't forget Palestine. I didn't know at the time what Palestine means. I asked my brother about it, and I kept seeing this sign until I finished school. So there, every year we go to the stadium for the final games and things. This sign is there. And I think it should be there, still there now. So it's been not only long, it's been painful. Wherever you look, there is pain in it. Anyway, I don't think I can add to your information about what's happening now, especially like when everything is on mass media. Everyone has their own, Facebook and computer and things. I cannot add to that, apart from just one thing. I don't know if it's privileged or not. I've been an eyewitness to somewhat atrocities. I have that advantage, if I can call it an advantage above you. I was there once, many times, but once I did a book about it. And that was in 1981, in July, when Israel attacked Beirut, a small place called Fakhani. And they dropped lots of bombs, of course. And now I think it's amazing, really. At the time, we thought the bombs they dropped were really massive. They say it was about 5 tons or something. Now, on Gaza, they dropped 30,000 tons. And I witnessed, I lived the impact of a bomb falling from the sky just near to you, where you cannot actually run, you cannot move, because it sucks the air, sucks the pressure, so you cannot actually escape. But the funny thing is, on that day, I was just sitting on a balcony talking to a friend, and this friend, Kareem knows him, he's Ismail Zayer. He's a loud person, I mean, he talks always loud. We were sitting on the balcony talking, and he's really loud. Somebody came from inside the room behind, and he said, would you please calm down, we'll have a meeting inside. So we couldn't, I said, well, let's go in, because I know him. He will be quiet for maybe half a minute, and then we'll start again. So we went inside. We went to the kitchen. And in 10 minutes' time, the bomb started falling on the area there. Of course, all these balconies disappeared. They're all gone, including the one we were sitting there. So we ran to the basement. In the basement, I saw so many people. Some of them were completely covered with white. It is the cement. The bomb could turn the cement into flour, like a flour. The pressure of the explosives and the heat. So people come covered with white, people limbed, and people shouting, screaming. A friend came with his 3 children. This is the first time ever he brought his children to his work, because there on top, where I was with this friend sitting, there's a magazine belonged to one of the Palestinian parties. So he brought his children to see his work. And that day, when the bombing started, he said, I want you to help me to save the children. Every one of you, whoever can, take one of them and run away. but you have to run to the right, the other one to the left, and don't go in one direction. Anyway, I took one of them, and I ran when one of the bombs just landed not quite close to me. So I couldn't really complete run, take the child further than a few meters away, because the pressure was like, there's no pressure. It's like an empty, it's like, the space capsules. You cannot run. It's like a nightmare. When a nightmare, somebody follow you and you try to escape and you cannot actually move. It's like that, very slow motion. Anyway, that's finished and gone. After so many years, that happened in 1981, and in 2017, I went to Ramallah, to Palestine, and I saw this young woman. She was looking for me. She knew that I'm coming, and she said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "No, I don't." She's a young girl, and she is the sister of that boy who I took away. This story is not an it looks an extraordinary story, but actually it's not. It's one of everyday life stories in Palestine, in the Palestinian struggle. But what happened that day, a different thing for me, was to make a book about it. In that time, not everybody had a camera like now. Cameras only, the expensive stuff, expensive devices. Only the photographic department in this organization. And some citizens have cameras, not everybody. So when this thing happened, I tried to find some photos. It was not easy to find photos to make a book at the time. But then, with the help of friends and so on, we collect. The reason why I bring this is if I show you the book now, you will see the pictures are exactly the same like what you see in Gaza now. No difference. And in that book, I put a note to remind people about other atrocity committed by Israel before that, before 81, just to remind the people that this is not new. It's happened before. And now, I'm reminding you that this is not new, what's happening today. It happened before. And between 81 and 2023 today, more than 12 attacks committed by Israel on Lebanon, South Lebanon, and on Gaza and on West Bank. So this is ongoing struggle. It's not a conflict. They call it conflict. Conflict is between two people, two forces who are equal. You don't have a conflict when you have only a knife and somebody have an aircraft and have a tank and cannons, and you have only one rifle, and then there's a conflict between the two. And people talk about, the Palestinians have to, compromise. Compromise what? There's nothing left. I want just to show you just a few pages from that book, which has been, at the time, there's no money actually, enough money, so it's been published poorly. That was in 1981 in Beirut, but it was translated into English and French. It's mainly a photograph thing. Yes, this is the book, yeah. And can I see the other copy? Yeah, if you see this one, this is I went to the hospital and asked a child who was wounded, who has lost his hand. And I asked him to draw a sketch for his lost hand. And this is his drawing. Okay, I will show you some photos now.
I can hold the book for you, or I can hold the book.
No, you don't need that. These photos are exactly the same like you see now on media. It's the same thing. Look, the colored ones. It's the same. Same children, same atrocities. So this is not what's happening on Gaza now. It's not because Hamas attacked. I'm not with Hamas. I don't believe in what Hamas as a religious organization, whatever it is. I'm not supporting that. As many, I don't support any religion organization. It's not me. But it's not because of what they did. It's here. And the other one, there's another book I did. There's a small one. It is about when the uprising started in 1985, and Israel started attacking people, of course. Children were demonstrating in the streets and so on. And what happened is this. If you take a close look at this, you will see the same thing. Israel doesn't need any reason to attack. It's built for that. It's been designed to do this. This is its blood. Without this, it will die. So now, if Israel agrees to peace with the Palestinians, I think this is not good for the Palestinians only. It is good for Israel to save itself. Because Israel getting mad. Israel getting to a very dark direction. So we have to, or Israeli allies have to save it from itself. Otherwise, it will kill itself and kill whatever around it. So this is it's the same. And these people didn't do like attack or kill anyone. Of course, you see these images every day. Anyway, so this is being made without the mass media or social whatever. Now we have this media. We have the social media, which is easy. So actually, we should use it as much as we can. Because now you can see the effect of it. When I did these books, it was very hard to explain to people that they say, oh, is it true? Is that really what happened? Are you sure? They don't believe you. Now it's easier. People believe you easy because it's everywhere. So, I mean, I don't mean to do this to kill anyone or to destroy whoever. I'm saying that just for peace. If we do it, then we go ahead to more peace and stability. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yousif. Thank you for all of your work and your ongoing work. It's a really inspiring story, and of course Yousif will be around when we're going to have some food together shortly. Listen, I don't know what exactly to do. I'll kind of go with a vibe in the room. Do you want to chat some more together, or should we break out and have some food? I don't know. Is anyone who really wants to contribute, for example? Anyone wants to say something right now? Please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have two conflicting questions, which was kind of based on what the very honorable gentleman was sharing with us. So he mentioned that a ceasefire is good for both parties, and that could, at least for the short term, allow the two to continue to exist in some kind of manner, and that it could be good for Israel to engage in a ceasefire process. But do we still want Israel to be in the region? I mean, for the long term, I mean, if we look at, let's say 50 years from now, right? Is it actually good for the region? Is it good for the indigenous people of the region to continue to have a colonizing power in the region that we've all seen how they behave? If they behaved in the way they behave now in Gaza and all the previous assaults on everyone in the region, is it actually an option for them to continue to exist in the region behaving like that? And maybe kind of a related question, is it actually an option at all for them to exist in a different way? Can anyone envision this colonizing power to actually start behaving itself and act like a decent state 50 years from now and live peacefully with everyone around them? So just a thought, question, multiple questions.
Anyone else? I think everyone is in agreement with you in the room. I don't. You've spoken. Anyone else who wants to come in who hasn't spoken? Anyone? I know there's some really bright people in here who've been thinking lots of interesting things and they don't want to share. There you go.
Thank you, bro. I guess this is maybe leading off with Yousif for talking about the continuity of the struggle, and also the young comrades at the start. And I guess it's just, might be a frustration more than a question, but where is the international response from the so-called anti-imperialist nations out there? I'm talking about our Cubas, our Nicaraguas, our Venezuelas. Do we even want to include China in this list? I don't know, but looking back at the struggles, I know the Palestinian struggle itself, and thinking about the times when, you know, Gaddafi was sending Semtex to our comrades in Ireland, or when Cuba was sending comrades to Congo, when the GDR was sending comrades down to Mozambique to help in the liberation struggle. Why are we not seeing similar actions now? I know we don't have the tricontinental movement, we don't have a non-aligned movement, we don't have the Soviet Union anymore, but we've seen zero response from our so-called anti-imperialist partners around the world. And I guess this goes back to the point of kind of unity amongst colonized people. We know that the energy is out there from the people themselves. You know, we see this even thinking of the Football World Cup last winter in Qatar. We saw the outpouring of support for Palestine amongst football fans, even amongst the Moroccan football team itself. Celebrated every match with the Palestinian flag, if you guys remember that. And that was in defiance of the Moroccan government's own actions, who aligned themselves with the Israelis and who broke their pact with Palestine. We've seen that, of course, amongst many other Arab nations, and that's also part of this whole mess that we're in now. And again, where is Lebanon? Where is Jordan? Where is Iran, which seems to have now just completely retreated from this battle? So yeah, I don't know if that's more of a comment or a question, but if anyone has anything to respond to that, that would be useful.
Good stuff, Rohan. Thank you. Anyone else before I allow Femi and our friend who wants to come back to grab the mic? Anyone else? Last chance. Come on then. You want to chat?
I'll let Femi
go first. Sorry.
Just adding to the gentleman at the back, sorry I don't know your name, and respectfully to everyone, after the ceasefire, especially when Israel just keeps on attacking, not just Palestine, but all around the world, are they ever going to stop? And I know they want a two-state solution, but I don't believe that. Upon deep reflection, really deep reflection and meditation, I don't think Israel is aiming for peace, and that affects everywhere that they're attacking. I'm not that knowledgeable of exactly all the other states that they're attacking, and like you said, China with the Uyghurs as well. I mean, I think Uyghurs have been forgotten, but that's a different matter for a different day. I also wanted to add, I think, what Femi said as well with the Indian and African unity. I've witnessed it in the community as well, that, when the Indians went from the partition of India and Pakistan, when they were colonized by the British, when they went to Africa, they're not classed as Africans. So I take a step back because that's where my family is from. So I class myself as Indian, African, and then maybe British or not at all. But the point I'm trying to make is they keep on having these internal disputes between the Indian, the Pakistani, and the African community. And racism stems within those communities as well. Like a Pakistani will say, oh, but why are you supporting the black people? Or the Indians will say, oh, but what caste are you? And I'm so sick and tired of it that it leaves me speechless, because like Femi, I like learning about different cultures. That is called being human. If we don't gain knowledge by each other's cultures, what are we really doing in terms of progressing towards unity? And it's a big struggle, like, especially in the older generation. Not everyone, maybe I'm generalizing, but the people I've spoken to, like, I don't speak to people just because they're from a certain caste or colour, and it just really frustrates. I think the youth are frustrated as well because that's how the white racism wins, because they just stand back and they're like, let them fight it out against each other while we watch. Like, we've turned into like a comedy show for them. That's all I have to say.
No,
wherever you can unite people, unite people.
I was going to say, but you said it anyway. Actually, there's a lot of unity at the grassroots and the youth. They want to unite, a lot of them.
Exactly, yeah.
But who's facilitating that? Who's saying out there, yeah, African and Asian youth unite, let's go? Who's saying it? So that's where, like, we come in. That's what we're trying to encourage. But yeah, absolutely brilliant stuff. Femi, you want to say something?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to leave with Femi. There's a couple of sisters at the back. Do you want to say anything? You sure? Yeah? Feel free. Anyone else want to come in after Femi? You all okay? All right, go on, Femi. You're last. Then I'll wrap up. Go on.
So just a point on what Shaz was saying about the two-state solution. Obviously, it's been a stalwart of UK-US policy for a long time to pretend this kind of two-state solution is what Israel wants. Israel has come out in the past few days and expressly said they do not want a two-state solution. The Israel ambassador to the UK was pressed and asked, do you want a two-state solution? Sippy or something, her name Sippy something, I can't remember her surname. And she said she was evading the question, and she was like, no, I don't think it will work. Mark Regev, very high in the Israeli government, again was pressed on the United States television and about the idea of a two-state solution. And he quoted some kind of old Israeli guy saying that the Palestinians should have less than a state, and defended that by then, of course, Michael Revis is Australian by birth, I expect him on New Zealand or something. He's one of these colonisers, and he came out and said that the Palestinians should have less than a state, because if the Palestinians have a state, what does that mean? It means that they get a military force. It means they get all the things that come with a state, which will be a threat to Israel. So it's interesting to see now that Israel, like senior Israeli officials, are now openly stating that they do not want a two-state solution, and Western media is having to deal with this, given the fact that for years they have been saying, oh well, the Palestinians have been offered a state millions of times. The Palestinians have been offered a state, and they've turned it. And now these Israeli officials are coming out and saying they shouldn't get a state because they've been emboldened by this. They're saying, great, we can now say when they don't get a state, we're throwing them out to Egypt. So yeah, Israel at the moment, the rhetoric coming from the Israeli government is against the idea of two states being able to exist. So that's just a point of information to add to what's been said.
Thanks, Frank. I agree. Yeah, it speaks to the brother's point, and I think, if you don't mind me saying, yeah. I think the brother was actually implying that, you know, it's deceit and manipulation. I mean, you remember in the Second Intifada, they blamed Arafat for the failure of Oslo. This game is long, long game, and we're not falling for it. So if it's okay, we're going to move to informal and then food and chat. And so just to wrap up, I think going forward, it would be good if we got your contacts. So do come up to me and just share your contact, that'd be useful. But I think for us locally, the people who are very, very local to West Ealing, Handball, this immediate area, I think we should think about doing more things in West Ealing. And I know we've got friends coming in from other areas in West London and other London, and thank you for the Oxford contingent who've come down as well. It's really appreciated your solidarity, and as you know, it's a reciprocated, interesting dynamic that we have between London and Oxford. So thank you. But I think we need to do more concrete things here. There's a lot of support for Palestine here amongst our neighbours, and I think we can do really creative, interesting things. The marches, the local protests is good, but what more beyond that can we do? How can we include the children? How can we include the mums, etc., etc., etc.? So I know there's lots of good new connections here. There's food. You must eat before you leave the door. because that's Indian and Arab hospitality, as you know. You must. We're going to force it on you. It's home-cooked food. There's chicken curry. There's a nice raita with salad and chives and mint and coriander. And there's a mixed dal. And there's some nice, what they call it, aromatic rice with saffron and cinnamon and spices, etc. It's all home-cooked. It was just cooked a few hours ago. I put the tea light candles on, so it's a bit more heat. So it'll be a nice hot plate. It's £5 suggested donation for the event, if that's okay, and £5 suggested for the food, but whatever you can afford. Could you please give a round of applause to the local butcher, Brother Masood, who runs West Ealing Halal and Grocers, because he donated free of charge the chicken, 8 kilos of chicken. So please, round of applause. You can literally taste the benefit of that contribution shortly. And again, just a round of applause for all the speakers. It's been a really amazing group of speakers, beautiful array of generations and backgrounds and kind of different approaches to hard politics, youth, art, poetry, design. I mean, I think just to say Yousif Naser is really kind of underplaying himself. He's made a very significant contribution to our struggle. Many of the PLO posters you'll see, you know, we love these posters, these old PLO posters, some of which our comrade has designed himself. And also, and I have to just big up Ghassan Kanafani as well, very important pioneering artist in the Palestinian struggle of Jabhat Shabiya, of the PFLP, who many of us are very close to as well and aligned to in some ways. And also the beautiful art that you did this evening, that a lot of people don't know about. If you don't mind me mentioning your name, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Don't have to. So Brother Manvir, who I just met yesterday in Southall, Yousif Naser did a beautiful portrait of Brother Manvir, who happens to be from my homeland in North India, Punjab as well. That was really beautiful. No, that was really gorgeous, so thank you very much. Round of applause all of you, and please enjoy the food. Thank you.